Hello everyone, my name's Eric Jones. Welcome to the lecture entitled Natural Pest Controls. It is a PowerPoint presentation that I did put together from a textbook that I used to use in the class. It's entitled The Gardener's Guide to Common Sense Pest Control. I'm sure you could still find it on Amazon, but it is a real good book. I use it quite a bit, still refer back to it, and there is a couple chapters out of here that I wanted to include in these series of lectures this summer, just because I think it could help jumpstart you on developing an integrated pest management plan or IPM plan. So it's good information. The first chapter entitled Natural Pest Controls is all about how Mother Nature controls some of our most horrific pests, and they may be horrific to you, they may be lovable by others. It just depends, and that really, a lot of this comes down, guys, to is it causing us economic damage? Are we talking about an infestation of pests that could totally wipe out our crops, or are we talking about dandelions and clover in our fescue lawns here? So yes, if it's going to cause you economic damage, we need to get rid of those pests. You may have some clients now that can live with clover and dandelions in their turf and not really care about it. They're not wrapped up in all that. But you may have a client, the good clients to have, that wants you to eradicate all dandelions and all crabgrass and clover from the yard. They want that perfect stand of grass. So, but what I'm just trying to get at, guys, is that people's perception of pests may be different from others, and so we're going to talk about how Mother Nature can control some of these pests that we don't like to see. And so in this lesson, we're going to look at the balance of nature and some of the fundamental ways in which living organisms control their own population and populations of other living organisms. We're going to talk about parasites. We're going to talk about parasitoids. We're going to talk about some damage that we may think is just horrible but is actually beneficial, especially some oak trees out in California that we'll see here in the next couple slides. But anyway, it's just amazing how the natural world can start taking care of itself, and as humans, we sometimes disrupt that. But obviously, when we look at all living organisms, we are including the subset of organisms that we regard as pests. Now, again, some of the pests may just be a nuisance, while others may actually cause economic damage. And when it comes to economic damage, we want to get rid of those pests, especially when it starts involving our livelihood. So we might ask, what is natural pest control? Natural pest control is pest control that occurs in nature without any prompting from humankind. So that means we don't have our lawn care technicians out there spraying for weeds or insects or doing pre-emergent applications. We're letting Mother Nature take care of it. Now, in the lawn, we're probably not going to worry about natural pest controls. I could see that when it comes to the insect side of thing, but the one way to get rid of crabgrass is that you're going to have to use a pre-emergent in the spring and later on in the spring, and then possibly a post-emergent herbicide later on in the summer. So there's things that we're going to have to use pesticides for, but natural pest control has no interruptions from man or woman applying any type of pesticide. It all happens in the natural world. And we humans have disturbed this great system, and we must learn how to reestablish its effects. And by doing that, we can incorporate that into our integrated pest management plans. And so hopefully this is getting you jump started on what type of integrated pest management plan that you may want to do for your project. Do you want to do it for a turf grass? Do you want to do it for greenhouse tomatoes? Do you want to do it for geraniums? What type of plant and situation do you want to create your IPM plan? So it's a jump start on that. Gives you a good foundation. The next podcast that we're going to talk about is going to be your introduction to integrated pest management. So we're getting off to that with a real good start. Understanding the natural principles will help you tremendously in managing your pest problems. You got to understand them. And what principles do we we might have? Well, we're going to find out. And furthermore, these concepts are critical to the development of a successful IPM program. Now, think about it on the turfgrass side. We have crabgrass, Digitaria species. It can produce 2,000 seeds per single square foot in a single season. So think about that. 12 inches by 12 inches or a foot by a foot, crabgrass can produce 2,000 seeds. Now, think about you, a horticulture professional, a turfgrass professional, whichever side of the horticulture side you're coming from. You're the expert. You've got the perfect lawn. You take care of it. You maintain the property. You're happy with your turfgrass. A neighbor moves in who does not care how their yard looks. They get crabgrass that produces 2,000 seeds per single square foot, and you have a big windstorm, or you're downhill from that house and the rain pushes those seeds over into your yard. Look at what that can do to your yard. Now you come home, your spouse is going to be upset with you because you had this perfect yard, and all of a sudden it starts looking bad. They're going to blame you, but you, being the expert, realizes what's going on. And the one thing that I like about neighborhoods and what I try to introduce to our clients is that I want that turfgrass separation. I don't want my turfgrass running into the neighbor's turfgrass. I want a shrub bed or some type of barrier that separates my grass from their grass. And that could be part of an IPM plan itself. You've got the perfect lawn. You don't want the weed seeds coming over from your neighbor's lawn. And a good old picture of the good old crabgrass. So, you'll study a little bit more about crabgrass in your ornamentals and turf textbook. So the good thing is you can take that textbook out, try to find some crabgrass and, study it and be able to identify that for people. Because a lot of people will get their weed grasses, mixed up. Dallas grass, people may think is crabgrass when it's truly crabgrass. So, start to learn it. Start to learn your weeds that are out there. The common housefly, it can lay over 600 eggs, which mature in about 6 days in hot weather. And think about this. You got a male and female fly flying around in your house, driving you crazy. They're going to lay these 600 eggs. They're going to mature. So that means they're going to hatch. They're going to be grown adults in about 6 days when it's really, really hot. Think of that reproductive rate. Seriously, think about that in 6 days. So you have 600 eggs, which in another 6 days have laid 600 eggs. Given that reproductive rate, that original pair of flies could eventually create a layer of flies thousands of feet thick or deep around the entire planet in just one summer. But we're thinking about, well, how can that not happen? Well, it's not going to happen because of natural pest controls. But if there was no natural pest controls or natural enemies of the common housefly, think about having a world covered thousands of feet thick with the common housefly. It could destroy, it would just be the planet of flies. But, and think about this, you've got a couple flies even hanging around in your garbage can, and, they come and pick up trash on a weekly basis. So you've got 2 flies hanging out in the trash can. They've just laid 600 eggs. The whole thing could really, really get out of hand. But thank goodness that there is the natural pest controls. And what are some natural pest controls? And why has this not happened? Because of our natural pest controls. And just think about it. Step back. Think about what could be some natural enemies of the common housefly. Well, other flying insects that eat them. Spiders. Spiders are one of the most beneficial natural pest controls that are out there. I love spiders, and people, they freak out when they see the spiders, or they want to stomp on it, or they want to, destroy them. No, your spiders are one of the main reasons we don't have that thousands of layers of thickness of flies out there. Birds eat them. Rain is a big enemy of the fly. Any of these little flying insects, when it comes up a major thunderstorm, they are destroyed because of a natural pest control such as rain. And so, what are some common natural pest controls? The most important ones are climate and weather, food and habitat, pathogens, predators, parasites and parasitoids. And so let's examine each one of these natural pest controls in more detail. Climate and weather. What is the difference between the two? So what is the difference between climate and weather? Climate is a long-term overview of temperature and humidity changes in a region. So it's over a greater period of time. We have a particular climate here in the southeast, and here in the Piedmont of North Carolina. Even our climate here in the Triad is different than the climate at the beach. So not that far off, but it is still a different region. Weather is the local and short-term variation in climatic conditions. So weather, we might have a wet summer. We may have a dry summer. We may have a cold winter. From last winter. But think about some things that could happen based on weather and conditions. And so what comes to my mind is the tomato hornworm. It is a pest in this area, and warm summers can really favor that hornworm. And given the weather in any type of year, whether it's wet or dry, is going to determine whether the hornworm breaks out early or late in the season, and to some extent, how large the outbreak is. And so, how big the outbreak is, based on whether it is wet or dry, is going to determine how much damage we could have to the tomatoes growing in our garden. And there is a good old picture of the tomato hornworm. And so, it has natural predators, the one being the climate here, but just think about all the other insects that would love to get hold of this little guy for dinner. Food and habitat. If there's no food, there's no organisms. Pests must have something to eat. And the simplest non-toxic method of control could be just eliminating their food source. So again, integrated pest management. Is there a way to get rid of the pests' foods? Very, very simple. Start thinking about ways of how to do that. Example, the ash aphid on the Modesto ash trees. Now, with the ash trees, sitting here thinking about that, just kind of recollect on my pest management career. But with the ash tree in some areas of California, having the sucker growth on these trees prevents a natural habitat for the ash aphid. And if you create a condition where these suckers are going to grow at the base of the tree, or you let the suckers grow and you don't cut the suckers back, because naturally all types of trees, they're going to have some suckers at the base, and especially if you're pruning the tops of these trees and you cut them back and you generate that sucker growth at the bottom and you don't prune that away, you're creating a perfect home for these aphids, and they will curl up in the leaves, and they'll drip this honeydew all over the cars and sidewalks, and in which just becomes a sticky mess all over the place. But it can create mold that'll grow, and it'll just damage your cars. It's not a pretty sight. I mean, it's not gonna hurt you or harm you. It's just going to financially destroy your car, and you're going to have to get it painted and stuff. And this is what they do. They curl up inside those leaves and they drip that honeydew. But we're only going to find them on the sucker growth. And so if you hire a landscaper and they come in and they start butchering the top of the trees, and that's going to give this whole flush of sucker growth, it's going to just create an entire mess for us. Think about deciduous trees, other deciduous trees. The aphids, they need the iron, and not the iron. They need the nitrogen. They need high nitrogen levels. They need that to feed on. They form new tissue and to produce their young by eating nutrients or eating plant materials that is high in the nitrogen levels. And so when you apply nitrogen, you may create more of a aphid infestation on your plant materials. So depending on when you put out that nitrogen, you may have the larger populations of it. So the aphids, they do have 2 population peaks each season, and this corresponds when nitrogen levels are at the highest in the foliage, and that's at spring leaf unfold, and then fall leaf drop is when you're going to see that happen. And so don't create more of a problem with nitrogen applications. Hold back. Don't do the nitrogen applications at that time of year when you're going to have the higher levels anyway. Pathogens. One can properly think of the most human lives as caught in a precarious equilibrium between the microparasitism of disease organisms and the macroparasitism of large body predators, chief among which have been other human beings. And that is a quote from William McNeill in his book Plagues and Peoples. The one thing that could wipe humans off the face of this earth is a virus. But pathogens, they are going to show up when there's an overpopulation of a pest. And when you have overpopulation, that is going to create a resource depletion, meaning less food, which will cause malnutrition, and there will also be competition for habitat. And this has always led to disease and war when it comes to human beings, but Mother Nature has definitely been doing this a lot longer than we have. So plants and animals have survived a lot longer. They will be here a lot more after our time here is gone. If something was to come and wipe out, the human population, there are still going to be plants and animals that remain, and they're just true fighters when it comes to survival. When it comes to pathogens, think about the old folk pest control remedy. I'm sure all of us can remember, either our grandparents or maybe a great uncle or something that had these folk remedies for pest control. And so think about it. Find an example, maybe shoot me an email of something that you had heard of, but we had all heard about crushing up dead bugs. You find the dead bugs and crush them up, and take the juice from those bugs and apply them to your plants or around your garden, because you're spreading that disease or whatever that did kill the original insect. You just got to be careful with some of that stuff, because things that kill insects could also kill human beings, and that's when we start thinking about the different pesticides that we apply herbicides for weeds, we apply fungicides for fungus, and then we apply insecticides to get rid of the insects. And so, things that kill the insects, guys, could kill us. Predators, they are critical in the suppression of natural populations of animals and plants, and together with pathogens and parasitoids make up the wonderful world of biological control. Now, there are companies that directly specialize in selling beneficial insects. And that's going to be kind of hard out in the open landscape. But think about the greenhouse environment. Some of you guys have already had greenhouse operations and production, and so you know you're in a controlled environment. And so when you are controlling an insect within a greenhouse, you could do that with a beneficial insect. And like I said, there's companies that specialize in just breeding these beneficial insects and actually coming out to your property or shipping them to you to release in a controlled environment. We have mammals, arthropods, and then you have microorganisms, or the fungus that exist out there. And these are what we call free living general feeders. Predators, they may eat a single prey at a meal, or they may consume many individuals, as our lady beetle does. Now, what would be an issue with using ladybugs as a beneficial insect? Now, they have they're kind of known for just skimming off the top of the pest problem. They're going to eat and run, basically. So releasing these ladybugs out around your foundation plants might not be the thing to do to help get rid of an unwanted pest. But using these ladybugs in a greenhouse, especially a greenhouse, where the windows are screened or has screening over it, and actually contains them within that greenhouse, is going to do you some good. They're going to stay inside their area, and we'll get most of it. But you don't want your beneficial insects or whatever you don't want to totally eradicate the pest. You do want some to hang around still, and what that does is create a food source for other insects. And if you eradicate all your pests, let's say in the greenhouse, then the beneficials are going to take off. They're going to leave, and they're not going to return because their food source is cut off. Predatory insects in the larval stage must consume several prey to attain maturity. So the predator adults lay their eggs near populations of prey where the hatching young have a good chance of obtaining food. Now, what exception to the rule might this be? What other type of insects may totally not do this? And that's going to be spiders. And like I said, spiders are one of the best natural pest controls that are out there. And what do? What is it that the spiders do? Well, they're going to weave their web in areas where they know their prey is going to hatch their eggs. And so what they're going to do is they establish themselves in that environment where their prey is more likely to encounter them. So they're going to put their webs over holes. They're going to put them near flower pots. And as soon as these insects emerge from the ground or whatever, the spiders are going to collect them in their web. And for the longest time outside of my house, we had the hugest spider. I mean, the body of it was almost the size of a $50. It was bigger than a quarter. And I loved going out and watching this guy all the time. And I'd watch him at night. You'd see a fly, or you'd see a mosquito or something fly into the net, and he would just attack. It was one of the coolest things to watch. But those spiders, don't kill them. Keep them around. Yes, if it's a, brown recluse, or losing track here, the brown recluse or the black widow. Yes, we definitely want to get rid of those. Now, parasites and parasitoids. What is the difference, and which is more effective? Well, the difference is parasites don't kill the host. Parasitoids do. And so which do you think is going to be more effective? And it's going to be the one that kills the host. So parasitoids are more beneficial than the parasites. And example of a parasite is the common pinworm. They're found all over the place. it's kind of a gross thing, having the pinworm around, but I mean, they're there. Parasites, they're not going to regulate a pest population, but they can put the brakes on it from really expanding out there. But you want the parasitoids to get rid of these pests. Parasitoids are the unsung heroes of naturally occurring insect pest control. They're too small to notice. We're not going to see them with the naked eye. Usually they don't have any common names, and their scientific names are so long and difficult to pronounce that we just don't know, don't know what they are. And this is where those companies that specialize in making the beneficial insects come into play. They're members of the bee and wasp family. They are host-specific, and they are restricted in the number of species they can attack. And being that host-specific is one way that they can eradicate that entire pest that you may be having in your crops. Here we have a wasp that is laying eggs inside the aphid, and when we see aphids and we see them under the microscope and stuff, and we see that little pinhole that's on the side of it, the wasp has laid their eggs inside the aphid. And what that's doing for that wasp is it's given a place for the eggs to develop. It's given them habitat. It's given them food. And basically, when those eggs hatch, they eat the insides of the aphid until it kills the aphid. And so when you do see that pinhole on the side of an aphid, it's been killed by one of the wasp laying the eggs in it. And so I don't know if as a child, maybe when you were growing up, and I've seen my kids do it, but if they catch an insect and they put the one insect inside the jar, and then a day or two later, they're punching holes in it, and they're trying to feed it and stuff. I mean, kids do some kid stuff, but a day or two later, you might see that one insect dead, but there may be 5 or 6 other different insects flying around in the jar. Well, that insect was killed by the parasitoids. So pretty cool stuff. And so how natural pest controls work, they work all the time. So then why do some of our pest populations grow so large that they become a problem? Well, we're going to look at a couple examples. And so we have the example of houseplants being set outside. Now, we keep our houseplants inside during the winter and stuff, and they may get an infestation of insects and stuff that is only found on inside. But if we place these houseplants outside in warmer weather, when it gets summer, the houseplants are out in the open environment for the natural pest controls to take place. Whether it's water, if the rain hits it and washes the aphids off, or the beneficial insects are able to get to the pests that are housed on the houseplant. So all kinds of things. By just setting out your interior plants for a day or two in the summer, will get rid of most of it. And then we have the California oak moth. And with the oak moth, the oak moth is capable of completely defoliating the oak trees, especially when the populations are super, super high. But really, when we look at this situation in depth, this only happens, the defoliation only happens when it's the dry season in California. And so when these moths defoliate the oak trees, they are reducing water loss through the leaves, which actually helps the oak trees. And furthermore, with these moths, the caterpillars will process the leaves, which are one of the harder leaves to decompose, but these the caterpillars are actually processing the leaves, and they're actually dropping their manure, the caterpillar manure, at the base of the tree, which in return releases nutrients when the rain returns back to California. And so, yes, we might have these oak trees that look horrible during the dry season, but what's really happening, guys, is Mother Nature's basically taking care of these oak trees. They're getting rid of their leaves, which reduces water loss. The moths are decomposing those leaves, which are hard to get rid of anyway, and then they're returning nutrients back in the rainy season. So again, Mother Nature doing her thing and making sure that that the trees are saved. And we need to learn more about these fluctuations that are part of natural cycle events in certain ecosystems. And we have to adjust our aesthetic opinions and reactions accordingly. And as human beings, we know that's hard to do. But get over it. If it looks horrible for a period of time, but it's doing the plant material some good, don't worry about it. And most of our serious pest problems arise through accidental and occasionally deliberate but misguided introductions of exotic species. And some of these species include the indoor cockroach, the gypsy moth, the Japanese beetle. And guys, beetles is the most numerous animal out there, even over fish. We think about how expansive and large our oceans are and the different fish species out there. There's actually more beetle species than any other animal in the animal kingdom, period. The Mediterranean fruit fly, Dutch elm disease, chestnut blight, dandelions, kudzu, and even your water hyacinth. So all of those were introduced pests from various resources. And so when we breed plants to satisfy human desires, we sometimes destroy traits that discourage insects and disease, one being hybrid roses. The traditional old roses are more disease resistant than the modern roses. And then with our London plane trees, if they're planted in an unfavorable site, they are susceptible to the anthracnose disease, which causes a fungus that would not exist if we planted the tree in a more favorable condition. So all of that comes to situations that we have to incorporate into integrated pest management. The life cycle of the plant, the more favorable site conditions of the plants, all of this can take place within your IPM plan. And guys, it's one way to make money, and it's one way to get paid for consulting. And I've always heard from some of the smartest individuals I know, if you can put consultant behind your name, you're going to make a lot more money than if you're actually out doing the work. So a little bit of advice there for you guys. And so we must thoroughly investigate how we can maintain the natural controls when altering plants or combining plant materials from different environments. And so, guys, appreciate this. Hope this helps. Hope this kickstarts you onto thinking about your integrated pest management plan that you'll complete for this semester. And I will see you in the next lecture. Thanks.